All right, so this is the Chapter 2 presentation, Thinking Like an Economist, and this is day 3 of 3. This will be focusing on the economist as policy advisor. So one can say that economists speak, or the way that economists speak, come in two flavors. The first type of statement that economists make are called positive statements, statements which are descriptive. They also have a set of statements which are called normative statements. These are prescriptive. So what's the difference between the two? The descriptive positive statements, as you see here, are claims that attempt to describe the world as it is. They can be evaluated by examining data and describes how the world works. For example, if I look up at the sky and I notice that it is sunny, and I then make a claim about the world and say it is sunny, that is a description of the world as I see it. Now here's where it gets a little bit weird. If I look up in the sky and it's clearly sunny, and I say, oh, it is raining, it is still a positive statement. It's an attempt to describe the world as it is. It's incorrect. It is sunny. It is not raining. But even so, it can be evaluated by examining data. Oh, we're not getting wet, thus you're wrong. It is not raining at all. But it's also a description of how the world works. So again, positive statements do not necessarily have to be true, but they must be descriptive. This is as opposed to, well, let's give some examples. I'm sorry about that. Here's one where programs like welfare reduce the incentive for people to work. That's a positive statement. It is attempting to describe the world as it really is. Now, you may or you may not agree with programs like welfare reducing incentives for people to work, but it can be evaluated through data as whether or not it is valid or invalid. The other type of statement, normative statements, are considered prescriptive. And we're using the term prescriptive in the same way as we think of medicine, a prescription. A prescription is for a substance that could cure you of whatever ails you. A person has high blood pressure, they're prescribed a medication that will help it. It's a way of suggesting then how to make things better. So you could read over to the left. Normative statements are claims that attempt to prescribe how the world should be. They involve, as you can see, personal viewpoints, and they are viewpoints of what is desirable. So this is a very big difference from the example that I gave of looking at the sunny sky and saying it's raining, because it's not desirable, nor is it undesirable for it to be rainy. It's to say that the sky is sunny or rainy is not attempting to fix anything. But a normative description is trying to do that. An example of it might be this. Paying people who aren't working, even though they could work, is wrong and unfair. We can see here that there is a sense of opinion about it. It is an attempt to fix the world by making sure that people get paid or not paid in whatever case it may be. So if, for example, I see you come into the classroom and you're wearing a red sweater, and I say, ah, that's a nice red sweater, that's a positive statement. If I say, red is not your color, you should be wearing blue, that's a normative statement. So, normally I would do this in a classroom and we would call on people to do it, but since we're not in a classroom situation, there's no way that I could really do this well. But we do have a few questions, and on your own, ask yourself, is it positive or is it normative? Such as, raising taxes on the wealthy to pay for government program grows the economy. And that is a positive statement because it is something that can be evaluated with data. It is a way of describing how the world works. Here's another one. Raising taxes on the wealthy slows government growth. In this case, raising taxes on the wealthy is considered a positive statement. Again, it can be evaluated through data, and it is an attempt to describe the world as it is. This one here. The government should raise taxes on the wealthy to pay for helping the poor. Now, hopefully, you'll have already noticed a change in the tone from what Bernie's saying as opposed to Tupac and Jane Austen. He is suggesting how things should be done. He is prescribing, and of course, if you have figured out, that's a normative statement. Again, the first two statements, you may or may not agree with it, but that can be discerned through data, through observation. The other one, it should be this or that way, is something that is a suggestion to fix what doesn't work. Now, normally I would have my class actually write their own normative or positive normative statement or a positive statement, but in this case, there's no way that we could do that one together. So let's just put that one to the side. Yeah. Sure. On a quiz, for example, I could put in a question that reads, is Whitney High School? Whitney High School is financed by the state of California, and I would ask, is that a positive statement or a normative statement? On an exam, it may be, you might have 4 different examples, and you may be asked which one is the normative statement or which one of these is the positive statement. You get what I'm saying? Since I heard nothing, I guess it's right. Okay, let me move on. Excellent. Thank you for that. All right, so let's move on. So where can we find economists? After all, many of you might be bitten by the economic bug or already had it and plan to go into economics as a profession one day, which can be very, very lucrative. So the question is, where can we find them? And although we can find them all over, let's just focus on government. To begin with, we can find economists in a government group called the Council of Economic Affairs. This one is a United States agency. It's within the executive office of the president. It was established in 1946, and these are the, men in this picture, men and women, who advise the President of the United States on economic policy. The CEA provides much of the empirical research for the White House and prepares for an annual report to the president. Now, the report that is issued by the CEA is done in February of each year, and it reviews what economic activity was and the impact of the year. It outlines the economic goals for the following year. It's based on the president's economic agenda. It makes projections of how the economy is going to be performing in the upcoming year. After the report is published, there's usually a lot of criticism. It sometimes attacks the importance on certain data that they have, and it also, you'll see attacks on specific goals. You can, if you're brave enough, go on the internet. You can get a copy of the economic report for the president, read it for yourself, and see if this is something for you. Some people are arguing that the President Trump pretty much has been ignoring the report of his advisors, but we'll leave that as it is. Now, there are many government offices within the executive branch of the United States, and I'm going to be listing them all in front of you, and then I'll look at each of them one by one. The first of it will be the first one you see is the Office of Management and Budget, the Office of the Treasury we're going to be looking at, the Department of Labor, the Congressional Budget Office, and we'll be taking a quick look at the Federal Reserve, also known as the Fed. So to begin with, the Office of Management and Budget, that is the OMB, and you can see Offices of Management and Budget right there on the banner underneath the eagle. This one is the largest office of the executive branch to the President of the United States. Its most important function is to produce the budget for the President of the United States. But it also measures the quality of the programs that the agency has. It evaluates policy. It evaluates the procedures to see if they comply with the president's policy. And it also works with other agencies to help with initiatives and other things. If you were the head of the OMB, after years of working as an economist, you report directly to the president, to the vice president, and the White House chief of staff. So it is a very, very powerful position, although most people are not even aware of it. The second part of the U.S. government where economists work on is the Department of the Treasury. And most of you should be familiar that it is a cabinet position. It was set up by an act of Congress in 1789, and that was to manage, well, government's money. The Treasury prints all the paper currency. It mints all the coins in circulation through a group called the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. It collects the federal taxes, so most of you are going to be very familiar with the Department of the Treasury one day through its arm, the Internal Revenue Service. It manages U.S. debt. It gives license. It regulates banks and other institutions. It advises the president on fiscal matter, on money matters. Of course, you all know that the head of the Treasury is the Secretary of the Treasury, the Treasurer of the United States, whose signatures you can find on all Federal Reserve notes. So check that one out. If you ever become Secretary of the Treasury, you will be one of the most influential people, not only in the United States, but in the world. Not too bad of a job. Next is the United States Department of Labor. and that's also a cabinet position, and that's responsible for things like occupational safety. It's concerned with wage and hour standards. These are the guys you need to go to if you ever need unemployment insurance benefits. If you're going to get services getting reemployed, it's responsible for some of the statistics that the federal government uses, and it helps states with their statistics as well. If you become the head of the Department of Labor, you are our labor secretary. And the Department of Labor is there to foster, to promote, to develop the well-beings of us guys, the wage earners, the job seekers, the people who retire here in the United States. The Department of Labor is there to help improve working conditions, to help create new opportunities for profitable employment, and to make sure that we get our benefits, our rights. The department also helps to regulate labor codes to make sure that our working environments are safe. And they, in fact, have created activities for about 10 million employers and about 125 million workers. So they are extremely important to us and our country in general. The next is the Congressional Budget Office, and that's a federal agency within the legislative branch. It's not a part of the executive branch, but the legislative branch of the U.S. government. And this is the group that provides budget and economic information to Congress. Let's say that you are a member of Congress. You wish to propose a bill that would, let's say, raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. One of the first groups to start looking at the economic impact of it would be the Congressional Budget Office. Now, it is made to be nonpartisan. It is there simply to give the best analysis that it can about things like the economic impact of certain bills, so that legislators on both sides of the aisle will have good, unbiased information to work from. There is a consensus among economists that the CBO has historically issued credible forecasts of the efforts of both Democratic and Republican legislative proposals. We have seen over and over again that it has been a very good force for good in that it is able to tell the truth. And as far as I know, has not been compromised by the current political climate. Finally, the last bit is the Federal Reserve, which is also known as the Federal Reserve System, or the Fed. This is the central bank of the United States of America. The U.S. established the Fed in order to carry out three objectives for, well, the monetary policy, how we use the money that we print. One of their jobs is to maximize employment, to make sure as many people as possible are employed. Second thing they're responsible for is to stabilize prices, that is to say, to keep inflation in check. The Federal Reserve feels that it's done its job if it can keep the inflation to about 3% a year. By the way, anything below 3% is considered a failure. We do need a little bit of inflation, but I'm not going to go through that right now. And finally, its third mandate is moderating the interest rates that the banks can loan at. When we go to chapter 24, we're going to be looking at the Federal Reserve in great detail. So I don't need to right now explain how any of this can go. But once you see it, you'll have a great understanding. That is what the so-called discount rate is. That's how it works. That's why I should be paying attention to it. Their job, of course, is to maintain the stability of the financial system. They got to make sure that our banks are working, that the banks have enough money, and that they don't run out. The Fed also does a lot of research to look into the economy. It provides lots of publications, and they do have a database called the FRED database that has a lot of important statistical stuff that, again, we won't be looking at until we look at the Fed in greater detail a little bit later. All right, the last section, I believe, from the reading, which is why economists disagree. And look, just like everyone else or any other discipline, economists have disagreements. Again, you probably have seen this before many, many times. They often disagree about the validity of alternative theories or about the size of the effects of changes in the economy on the behavior of households and firms. It is possible often simply because they have different values. They may see the world very, very differently from one another. Again, if they're presenting with data, as in this, it is possible to say, yes, there are 4 spikes on this thing. Or you can say there are 3. Who is correct? Again, as we saw before, it may be context. Or in the case of this, which is an optical illusion, there may be absolutely no reason here. So let's take an example. An economist named Fred might feel that a change in how taxes are calculated, that is to say the tax code, such as getting rid of a tax on income and replace it with a tax on consumption, in other words, you get taxed more for buying goodies, would increase savings. That's what he believes. Bring in a consumer tax, more savings will come in. And that's a good thing. A second economist, let's name him Frederick, feels that a change in the tax system would have little effect on saving behavior and therefore does not suggest the change in the tax code. Both of these are very well informed, but they have different ways of looking at the world based upon their own knowledge, based upon past experience, and so forth. It is the later accumulation of data then that will help decide which one of these things to do. A second reason why economists disagree is in the perception of reality. As you can see here in the picture, nothing is as it seems. If something is dressed a certain way, like the hamburger over to the left, of course it's going to look wonderful and delicious as opposed to the reality. And again, some economists just see the world in one form or another. But for the most part, economists do agree most of the time on stuff. And a version of this is in your textbook, so you don't have to write any of this down. But we can see that in the past, for example, that 93% of economists, both to the left and to the right and everywhere else, agrees, for example, that a ceiling on rent reduces the quality and quality of housing available. A ceiling means rent control. They can only raise rents a certain rate. They agree that by 85%, number 9, that local and state government should eliminate subsidies to professional sport franchise. That is to say, that they should not pay the whatever team, the Chargers, to build a stadium for free. That's not good, and so on and so on and so forth. All right, that ends it. Wow, that was quick. We have quiz number 3. That'll be for next time. I think the page numbers are right, 27 to 33. It'll get to the end of the textbook and covering the material that you were responsible for given to today.